Now, detonate the reality bomb!
I will build a great, great wall.
Some alien race to come down and threaten us.
Is the singularity near?
The truth is out there.
The military-industrial complex.
The 7 mountains of the influencers of culture.
To be as gods, you know.
Change has come to America.
Catapult of propaganda.
From a secure location on top of the ridge in the heart of the beautiful Missouri Ozarks, this is A View from the Bunker. Now, here's Derek Gilbert.
The UFO phenomenon, the alien abduction phenomenon, not necessarily demonic, but they might in fact be worse, if that's possible. Welcome to A View from the Bunker. I'm Derek Gilbert. If you're watching this on the YouTube channel, youtube.com/Derek Gilbert, you'll see that we're recording this at the office today, which is why this guest hasn't been on the program in a while. We kind of get into a flow here at work, into a routine, or at least I do. And I don't like to break from routine. I'm kind of like Sam T. Doxson in that regard. Don't move my cheese. I like my, but I am remiss because we've got this, weekly web program, this weekly podcast, and could be using it to actually tell people about our book. And even, Josh's new book here.
Yes.
So anyway, if you're watching this, you see already the book, which we are proud to say spent several weeks as the #1 new release in Amazon's science and religion category. Josh's new book, Unraveling the Multiverse.
Yep.
One of the top 5 new releases there. And between, for a while there, finish the introduction, Derek. The book, The Day the Earth Stands Still, Unraveling the, or Unmasking, Unmasking, Unraveling, if that'll be
Same
the ultimate
thing.
goal. Yeah. The old gods behind UFOs, ETs, and the official disclosure movement. Josh's book, Unraveling the Multiverse, which is the... Go ahead and read that subtitle there,
Yeah,
Josh.
I did a classic Tom Horn move and gave it a paragraph for a subtitle, but it's Unraveling the Multiverse, and I actually have to read it off the cover of the book because I don't have this memorized. I don't think any human mind could.
Well, yeah, just as well.
Yes. The Unraveling the Multiverse, the Christian's Guide to Quantum Physics, Entities from Higher Realities, Strange Technologies, and Ancient Prophecies Being Fulfilled Today. So that's
for the screen cap for the. This will be the screen cap for the featured image. So just do a quick screen cap.
Yeah.
There we go. Okay, there we go.
Beautiful.
Now, if you're listening to the podcast, that was 2 seconds wasted, but we appreciate your indulgence.
We'll leave them wondering what was going on.
Exactly. So, in case you're wondering now, if you're still listening to the podcast and if you've not been following this program for a while, you know by now, it's Friday afternoon, and the guest
We've
this
had a
week
long week.
is Josh Peck.
Yes, sir. Thank you for having me back on.
Well,
it's actually been a couple of years.
It has been, and like I said, we've done some stuff here at Skywatch TV where we should have taken advantage. Now, I took a kind of a hiatus from View from the Bunker last year because from July onward, man, this is going to be a rough program. And it's not even happy hour. I say that tongue in cheek, of course. From July onward, and of course, a lot of what we did in July related to what turned up in the book, The Day the Earth Stands Still. We visited the UFO Festival in Roswell in July. And from there, then we had the conference or at least Sharon and I attended the conference in August in Boise. Then we had the conference in September.
Yep.
In Branson, and then the October conference in Oklahoma City. And of course, if I'd been smart, I'd have written like 2 presentations and just repeated them over and over. But no, I wrote 5 new presentations.
Well, your audience will appreciate it. I do that too, though. Anytime that I have a conference, I don't repeat.
Yeah.
Though I did do that one time because I was filling in out of nowhere. I was filling in for somebody else, and so they asked me if I could do another presentation, and I just happened to have one on my laptop. So I did do it one time. But yeah, every time I write a new one too.
Well, it's a powerful motivator to get me to do some work, because otherwise, I tend to do as little as I can get away with. But the
like Office Space, you do just enough to not get fired.
Yeah, that'd be great. But no, I try to use the motivation, the fear of looking like a fool in front of lots and lots of people gets me to actually put in a lot of work.
Yes.
So anyway, that's why View from the Bunker kind of went away the second half of last year, because we were really busy.
Slammed, yeah.
So hopefully we'll be able to keep up the schedule this year. But it seemed to me that I was remiss, since the book has been out now since December 1st, and why don't you have one already? That we should have been talking about this a couple of months ago.
Right.
the day the Earth stands still, if you were to describe this in an elevator pitch to somebody who'd not heard of it before, well, how would you describe this book?
Yeah, because it's not enough to just say it's a book on aliens, and it's not even enough really to say that it's a book on aliens from a biblical perspective, because there's a few of those out there. It would depend on who I'm talking to. Probably to your audience, the main pitch I would say is this is not another Nephilim book. Mm-hmm. This is not another demons are modern Genesis 6 Nephilim or aliens. I mean, or aliens are just they're
trying to get us to recreate the Nephilim.
Yeah. It's not that. That stuff is important, and I'm glad that there are people writing about that. But that's been pretty well covered, I think. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's always going to be new stuff that people turn up and stuff. So I don't want to sound like I'm disparaging any of the other amazing authors that write about that. But we took a totally different approach, and actually. There is one time that the word Nephilim appears in the book, and it's to explain that this is not another Nephilim book.
Right.
But we wanted to look at what does the Bible actually truly say about not only the possibility of life on other planets from a theological standpoint, but also the alien abduction phenomena and the UFO phenomena, which we believe are different things.
Right.
And those can also be divorced from the overall question of can life exist somewhere out there? Does the Bible allow for that? Now, that's not to say that we believe we're being visited, or I should say that doesn't mean that we believe we're being visited by ET, because we don't. We do believe we're being visited, but it's by something else, and it goes a lot deeper than to just say, well, it's just all demons.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Which gets to why we say that this may actually be worse than just a demonic infestation.
Yeah,
which is bad enough.
Demons compared to these things, demons are just kind of like pesky pests. You got to what's that pest control business? You got to call the Orkin man. And they're annoying, and they can cause a lot of damage if somebody doesn't know what they're doing in spiritual warfare and stuff. But what we're talking about here, I think these are truly horrifying things.
Yeah,
going back to the old gods and stuff like that.
Right. And that's why we got Dr. Michael Heiser's books out here, and we'll also tell you about the package that Tom Horn has put together before the end of the program. But these are the newly published editions by Defender Publishing, which, of course, is Tom Horn's publishing company. I've got them out of order here. Facade was the first one, and is for you OCD folks here to make sure they're in the correct order. Facade, and then the Portent, and Mike deals with that in his novels. Not that we're saying that Mike would necessarily endorse everything we've got in our book here, but we respect and agree with the theology that he's included in there, but that he's the scholar. If we make mistakes, we can just say, well, we're not PhDs.
There's a layman for you.
That's it. Yeah. But
Mike's not allowed to make mistakes.
He's and I respect him. Respect this about him. He kind of holds us to a standard of accountability we might not otherwise have.
Yep.
So
I love that about him.
And I think it's to his credit that he's willing to associate with jokers like us.
Yeah.
So we're not. Again, don't assume that this implies Mike Heiser endorses what's in this book. We do endorse what's in his.
Yeah.
But anyway, the phenomenon of UFOs, and this is really news. I mean, it almost, because of what the New York Times reported in December, about 2 weeks after our book came out. It was like the 16th or thereabouts, the second Saturday in December, I think it was. The New York Times ran this big story about this event that took place in 2004, November of 2004. And I actually got an article coming up in next month's Skywatch TV magazine about that incident, because it's been played up and taken seriously by the major media for the first time.
Yeah.
And a lot of UFO true believers have seized on it to say, official disclosure is about to happen. Mm-hmm. We'll talk more about that event in a minute, but official disclosure, part of the subtitle, you dealt a lot with that, of that part of the book related to the contacts with Hillary Clinton's campaign manager, John Podesta, in 2016. What is Podesta's role in the official disclosure movement, and why did it come up during the campaign?
Yeah, it's weird because for the first time ever, this topic's being taken seriously. And it actually, surprisingly, was being taken really seriously, at least behind the scenes, with the DNC and with John Podesta and the contacts that he had. So in the WikiLeaks email dumps that got released, which is awesome. I mean, people have varied opinions on it, and I get with the hacking and the security issues and stuff like that. I get it. But I'm glad that we have access to these emails because it's really telling. They were already talking about official disclosure really heavily, and they were talking about their different interpretations of it. So John Podesta was in contact with Edgar Mitchell, who was the sixth man on the moon. He was an astronaut. He's passed now. But he was a sixth man on the moon, big time astronaut. You would think a really science minded guy, and in a lot of ways he was.
Well, and he's got a PhD, and he was co-founder of the Institute for Noetic Sciences, and I think that's relevant. We can talk about that.
Oh yeah, and Quantrek too. And,
right.
And it was weird because they so Edgar Mitchell through Terry Mansfield. Who basically kind of acted as intermediary between Edgar and John Podesta, and then John Podesta had Aaron Sepp, which was like his assistant. So there were four people involved. I kind of map it out in the book to try to make sense of all of it. But basically, through these two women, Edgar Mitchell and John Podesta were in contact. It was mostly Edgar Mitchell trying to contact John Podesta. John Podesta showed a little bit of interest at first. Then there was always the open door. So when Edgar Mitchell first contacted John Podesta, it was about this official disclosure movement and this question that Podesta has been heavily involved in since forever. He even tweeted out that his because he worked in the White House with Obama and all that stuff. He even tweeted out that the biggest failure of his career was that he couldn't get the Obama administration to basically to go with the official disclosure stuff, to release what they know. So he's been a big champion for the official disclosure movement. Now, why that's important is not only does it show that they've already been talking about this, there were stuff in the email, and I mean, we put them in the book. We just published like we just put them in the book, so people don't have to go online and try to search and find this stuff. Every email is in our book, and I provide an analysis of each one. So the weird thing is, not only was official disclosure being talked about, but how to interpret it. Actually how to interpret it was talked about even more than the movement itself, or just the fact that we need to release this stuff. This stuff needs to get released somehow. It was more about how is this going to be interpreted? And Edgar Mitchell had a lot of ideas about that John Podesta seemed really interested in. Now, there were other people that were contacting John Podesta, like, what was his name? Bob Fish, I think. Now, when Fish was emailing Podesta, he was actually giving some scientific ways to try to study this phenomenon to see what's really going on. And it was pretty obvious that Fish, along with Podesta, they both believed that this was life somewhere out there visiting us. But the way that Fish approached it, I actually really liked, because it was more grounded in science. It was more, if we look at the aerial phenomenon and map it out throughout the course of a year, see where it's more heavily involved, see not so much, and maybe we could. There are a lot of scientific things like that. Whereas Edgar Mitchell's emails were just like off the wall. These are ETI from a contiguous universe, and they're talking. They're contacting through telepathy. Terry Mansfield, and she knows what's going on, and she's interpreting it for us and telling us all this stuff, and we work with them through Quantrek, and all this weird, just out of the and no evidence, zero evidence for any of it. But Podesta was really interested in that, because he was, at least at first, like having a conversation and trying to meet, and whether a meeting took place or not, we don't know. It seems like there was at least a Skype call or something. But they were talking about getting the Pope involved in it, and they wanted the President Obama, involved in it, and in this talk, in this meeting. But when Bob Fish emailed him with like actual things, like here's how we can get some evidence to get this disclosure thing going, Podesta forwarded it to his assistant and said, basically, you handle this. I don't want. It was like a one-word email, like just or FYI. I think he just put FYI and just sent it off. Didn't write him back. Didn't really take it seriously. because the scientific way, the scientific method isn't as interesting and appealing as all the crazy out there stuff. That's why Ancient Aliens is so popular.
Right. And that's one of the reasons we wrote the book is because what you get right down to it, this fascination with ancient aliens, this fascination with the UFO phenomenon really comes from a spiritual worldview, a spiritual perspective, not from a scientific standpoint.
Yep.
It is an alternate religion.
It is.
That's why we wrote the book, because in fact, what we found in digging into some surveys of what American adults believe is that like 3 times as many American adults believe that we're being visited by extraterrestrials and actually believe the Bible as it's written. Mm-hmm. 3/4 of us call ourselves, in America, 3/4 of us call ourselves Christians. But we don't really believe everything that's in the Bible. Yeah, maybe Jesus lived a sinless life, but maybe he didn't. Maybe he lusted for Mary Magdalene. We don't really know. Did he really rise from the dead? I mean, Sharon attended a church back in Lincoln, Nebraska, a church there where she sang in this wonderful choir. 100 members of the choir was awesome. Mm-hmm. But the pastor said, well, I really don't get the whole resurrection thing about Easter Sunday. Jesus is really sort of a cosmic life coach. He didn't say it in so many words. But for many of us American Christians, that's what we reduce Jesus to. He's an example.
Pastoring a church.
Yeah, exactly. Well, exactly. Mm-hmm. I mean, born of a virgin, really? No, I can't believe that. I can't believe he literally rose from the dead. Satan is just a concept. He's a symbol of the evil that's inside all of us. Jeez. That's where American Christians are. According to the Barna Group, that's what most American Christians believe. Most American Christians don't believe the Holy Spirit's real, don't believe Satan is real, don't accept the basic tenets. So even though we call ourselves Christian, when you start drilling down into what American Christians believe, not so much.
Yeah, a lot of Christians will call themselves Christian, and it's more of a cultural statement.
Exactly. I call myself Christian because I'm not Muslim, Jewish, Hindu, or Buddhist. Yeah. And what does that really mean? It means you sort of create your own. You create God in your own image instead of the other way around. And so that's why we wrote the book, because when you say, you realize you've got 36% of American adults saying, we believe America's being visited by ET, and that's relevant because they're looking to ET for the answers to the questions that have plagued humanity since the beginning of time. Where'd we come from? Why are we here? What happens when we die? Yep. And only 10% of American adults say, we know the answer. We've got this book here that has all those answers in it. Yeah. So anyway, that's where this book is coming from. And that's why George Mitchell, again, going back to the senator from, was it Maine? No, it's Edgar Mitchell. Why his worldview is relevant when it comes to this.
Oh, yeah.
And why this fascination. There was there was some strange theological language that entered into those email communiques with John Podesta. Celestials?
Oh, yeah. That was really weird, too. And that even goes more to show that these people, even those higher up in the official disclosure movement, they are treating it like a religion. Yeah. Now, they probably wouldn't admit to that. They probably don't even think that. But that's what it is. I mean, usually if you take a UFO believer, excuse me, and you try to tell, if you were to try to tell them, that's a religion, that's not like a real like scientific thing, they would get offended. Mm-hmm. Because they don't. A lot of them like to think that the UFO and aliens, that it somehow is connected with science. And it should be.
It should be.
It should be, but it's really not.
Sure didn't look that way when we were down in Roswell last year.
No. Yeah, and I mean, you brought up this point a bunch of times. NASA wasn't there. There wasn't any colleges or universities trying to sign up some science students or something for, the STEM research or something like that. There wasn't anything like that. Mm-hmm. But there was tarot card readings. There a lot of New Age and occultic stuff. There was no Christian booth.
No, well, there were a couple we saw. Actually, there was.
Yeah, but they were selling T-shirts and stuff. There wasn't. Was there anything that was specifically like
to the gospel, selling the gospel? Well, to be honest, I don't remember. We did that one interesting interview with the fellow who has the shop that sold like fossils and rocks and stuff like that. Yeah, and it was God love him. It was there he is on Mars Hill, right on the corner on the main street in downtown Roswell. Yep. With a shop talking about, crystals and rocks and stuff. And so a lot of New Agers walk in there expecting, resonance crystals for healing or whatever. Mm-hmm. And it's being run by a Bible-believing fundamentalist Christian.
Yep. And they get the gospel.
Exactly.
And he presents it in a really non-assuming, non-confrontational.
Right.
I mean, he's had that shop for a really long time. It stays in business. So And I mean, it's pretty much all New Agers there. I mean, there's not a whole. I mean, there are some Christians, but I don't think Guy Malone is in there every day buying up a bunch of rocks to keep this guy in business.
No. There are people coming in there and they're finding what they want. They're buying their pretty rocks and stuff that he finds out in the desert or what have you, and fossils and stuff. But yes, most of the booths that we saw there was a very heavy New Age influence, and it was really kind of weird because again, you'd sort of expect MIT or NASA to be there recruiting people there to learn about space travel and engineering and astrophysics, and no, not so much. It was more when are the aliens going to come and help us evolve?
When are they going to save us?
When are they going to save us?
Yeah,
right,
exactly. And you know what was so weird is when we were doing the interviews on the street, consistently, we would ask, what are you here for? And a lot of them were kind of like, I don't know, just thought we'd kind of check it out. Seemed pretty interesting, They're
Roswell's
something.
Not an easy place to get to.
Exactly.
You don't,
it's out in the middle of nowhere.
You don't stumble onto Roswell, New Mexico.
Exactly.
Gee, we just happened to be here and saw all these, inflatable UFOs.
Yeah. And so it tells me that it's like, there's something in people that crave some type of supernatural something, the mysteries of life. So where are we as Christians? Because it took nothing to get people to come to Roswell, like nothing. Like maybe aliens once 70 years ago,
Yeah.
It did nothing to bring all these people here, and they didn't even really know. I mean, they kind of got there maybe something crashed here, and I don't think it was a weather balloon, and we got a lot of that kind of stuff. But no, we didn't come across anybody that I would say is an expert. It's not like it brought a bunch of experts in, maybe to speak and stuff, but the actual audience, it was just general kind of interest stuff. We as the church, so we don't have an excuse why we can't bring people into church, or why can't we bring people, into our small group studies or something like that. There's an interest.
Exactly. Can you imagine what church would be like if you had people with that kind of interest showing, well, I just thought I'd show up here because I'm really curious about what happens when I die.
Yeah.
Did God really walk here on earth? Boy, that must have been really awesome.
Yeah. And the church is really, has really been dropping the ball because we've stripped out anything supernatural from the Bible. Everything's about rules and legalism.
Yes.
And people are going to be turned off to that. I mean, that's partly why this whole alien question is so popular in our culture today, because aliens don't care what you do. They don't care what rules you follow. They don't care how long you have your hair. Or, they don't want to argue about, can you wear jeans on Friday or should a woman preach? Like, aliens don't care anything about that.
Right.
They just supposedly
no
want...
moral code, no law, no nothing. And we Christian, in fact, Albert Mohler, who's the president of Southern Baptist Theological Seminary, he had an article that I posted at, linked around at Facebook, and actually,
I saw that.
It blew up a lot of responses because I think
Semi-viral.
people, reading into what he was saying there. But the point of his article I thought was really good, is that we Christians have done a poor job of explaining the miracle of grace through faith in Jesus Christ. I mean, we're all condemned as sinners. The wages of sin is death. That's what we all deserve. Those are our wages for the way we live.
Yep.
But because of grace, which is attained only through faith in Jesus Christ, we escape that fate.
Yep.
And yet, we Christians have substituted moralism for grace. And in trying to live acceptable, pleasing lives in our little Christian enclaves, we have how did he put it, we've substituted moralism, being raised right. If you're a Southern person, you kind of get what that phrase means. That boy's raised right. Well, he's respectful to his elders, he follows the rules, he doesn't get in trouble, and for most of us Christians, that's good enough. In other words, living according to God's command, the standards set by Jesus Christ, which are impossible to meet. I mean, hating somebody is murder. It's not like murder. It's not a symbol for murder. It is murder. Lusting after someone, and men, let's be honest here. Who among us hasn't? That is adultery. It's not like adultery. It is adultery, which means everyone among us has been unfaithful to our spouse at some point.
That's right.
So those are the standards that Jesus lives according. But miracle of miracles, he said, look, if you put your faith, confess your sins to me and accept me as Lord and Savior, and it's good. I'll carry that burden for you.
Yeah.
But instead of that, we've got this sort of unspoken rule that as long as we avoid any public scandal, that's good enough.
Yeah.
And that's what the culture gets from us too, is that I've got to live according to these rules that they're laying out there. Wow, why would I want to do that? Yeah. Hey, these aliens might explain all of those questions, and without, like you were saying, Josh, I'm taking a long way around to get back to Josh's point. Without that, these restrictive rules, I can go out and I can party and I can, run around and do whatever, and it's all good because the aliens don't care.
Yeah, exactly. And they don't follow. A lot of them don't follow that line of logic all the way through to where it ends. Doesn't that say something that they don't care? I mean, that's not really a good thing? I mean, if you have a negligent parent who just doesn't care what their kid does, that is a terrible, awful parent who shouldn't be having kids, So imagine, like, in their worldview that aliens did create us, but they're not helping us. Why do we even have cancer in the first place at all? Not only, someday they're going to come and heal it. Well, what's taken so long, and why do we even have it? If they built us or genetically engineered or whatever.
Well, that's one of the key messages. One of the consistent messages we get from contactees is that they're here to help us, and they're here to enlighten us. From Blavatsky on in the 1880s. The Secret Doctrine and ISIS Unveiled, the Masters of Ascended Wisdom. Or ascended, I keep getting the phrase, mixed up. It's either ascended masters of ascend, whatever. The ascended masters are there to help us, guide us in our evolution.
They're doing a pretty awful job,
right? But as you say, what are they waiting for?
Yeah,
they want to help us or not? What's that? Why are they still? Just kind of
around.
dangling a carrot in front of us. What do we have to do in order to achieve, the worthiness?
Yep.
Which gets back to sort of a works-based salvation.
It does.
And here's the other thing that I have to question when the contactees say, who are some of the modern UFO cults, like the Raelians?
Oh yeah, the Rael and
some of those folks who will say that the great spiritual leaders of human history, Muhammad and the Buddha and the Krishna, and Jesus, they were just, they were our emissaries. Well, why did they lie about that then?
Why didn't they say it?
Why didn't they say so? Yeah, well, I'm just, the vanguard for a group that's coming to help you. That's not what Jesus said. That's not what Muhammad or any of these other guys said.
Yep.
Why would they lie about that?
Yeah. And if they did lie about it, why would we want to follow them and listen to them anyway?
Exactly.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. They a lot of them they don't follow that line of logic, because if they did, there's no way you could logically just be in that line of thinking and have it make any kind of sense.
Right.
At least Jesus, like he told you exactly what you got to do, and it's really a light burden.
Yes.
It really is. You ask him.
Yes,
that's about it.
I'm a sinner. Come into my heart. Save me.
Yeah.
And he's like, okay.
Yeah. And then of course after that is repentance, and you turn you turn things around. But that's an ongoing process throughout life.
Right.
That now you have Jesus guiding you in. And.
It's like your software is being rewritten and upgraded while you're still running. You don't have to shut down and then reboot it. So there's a process involved. It's
exactly. And it's a clear process that's spelled out throughout the Bible. It makes sense. It's easy to explain. Aliens give you nothing. You don't know what they want.
Exactly, because the messages are not consistent.
Yeah, they're always different.
Contactee to contactee.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah, they can't even get where they're from straight. They used to say they used to tell people that they're from the moon or the sun. Yeah, right.
Venus.
Yeah. And now that
Mars.
we can observe those places and see clearly nothing lives there, then they started saying, well, it's actually Zeta Reticuli and Arcturus and all these places that, well, now we can actually we can actually examine exoplanets and see that, okay, so far at least we haven't seen anything that's going to support life. So now it's contiguous universes and parallel realities.
Well, there's that, and there's also been enough research done over the last half century or so, which Gary Bates pointed out in the interviews that we had with him on Skywatch TV, but also in the movie Alien Intrusion, that the energy requirements to go even to the nearest star, Barnard Star, which is 4 light years away, would be immense. intense. But even if you got up to enough speed to make the trip within a human lifetime, then the impact, for one thing, the radiation that would be just washing across the craft would be intense, burned you to a crisp. But the impact energy of hitting grains of sand, grains of dust, or even something as small, a rock with the mass of a raisin, they said at 9/10 light speed would be like, what did he say, like 80 Hiroshima bombs? Was that it? Or something like?
It would be an annihilation.
Right. So now that's becoming more popularly known and more commonly known, that's when they're coming in with the idea that, okay, well, maybe these are extra dimensional, which is a conclusion, or at least a theory that was that seemed more plausible to secular researchers like Jacques Vallée, J. Allen Hynek, who invented the Close Encounters scale, CE 1, 2, 3, 4. John Keel, who wrote the Mothman Prophecy, saying, these things act more like extra-dimensional or interdimensional entities than extraterrestrial. So why is that important?
Yeah, and people are starting to wake up to that too and realize that, okay, scientifically the ET thing doesn't really make sense. So there are plenty of people that still hold on to that, and they usually go to, well, maybe it's wormholes or some sort of. That's still an interdimensional thing. You can have, it's kind of like interplanetary and extraplanetary. Like you can, like if we go to Mars, we would be an interplanetary species. We could be considered that even here on Earth. But if we're from another planet, like to a Martian or something, we would be considered an extraplanetary. So you can have both. So interdimensional doesn't necessarily always have to mean extra dimensional. So right now people are really focused on the interdimensional thing because this is how ETs who are just like us, so they say, so just like us on some other Earth-like planet, 20 billion light years away, whatever. If they're an interdimensional species, they can fold space according to the laws of physics and still get here. And there's still problems with that. Now, extra dimensional, I think that's the one, the EDH, extra dimensional hypothesis. That's the one that I think has the most weight to it. And but people are kind of resistant to that. Not as much anymore. It's gaining more popularity, but because it's so close to being spiritual, it's so close to turning the ET stuff into a religion, which is what it is. Yeah. But if you think about it, and we've documented this in the book, that the crafts and the abduction experiences, they follow the culture. So wherever the culture goes, they kind of like adhere to that somehow. I don't know how they do it, but they do. What it tells me is that the culture, I think, is starting to get away from this materialist worldview, especially with stuff like quantum physics, and even just in the past couple of decades. And these beings, these ancient old fallen gods, or whatever people want to call them, they're conforming to that type of culture, and that's why to the culture, something like an extra-dimensional or a contiguous universal being is more plausible to people like John Podesta or Edgar Mitchell or Terry Mansfield, because it explains why they have to communicate telepathically, why they can't flip a radio on, Yeah,
use a webcam.
Yeah, use a webcam. I mean,
look, we can even do that, and we're not even, extra dimensional.
Yeah, so I mean, either they're complete idiots, who would want to follow those anyway, or they're just so far advanced that because they would have to be from another dimension. They're so far outside of the realm of what we can even imagine or experience that they have to do the telepathy thing, or they got to do all this weird stuff. Yeah, then it's a religion.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, look, even when Jesus rose again from the dead, which was the ultimate confirmation, because this is what sealed the deal for me when I was trying to figure out what it was I believed and how I could explain to my daughter why certain things were right and other things were wrong. And it all came down to, on what am I going to base my worldview, and how do I know that information is true and correct? And so I started studying apologetics. Yeah. And when I read about the account of James, who wrote the Epistle of James, who was mentioned in John 7 verse 5 as one of the brothers of Jesus who did not believe in him during his lifetime. Then you read 1 Corinthians 15 and you see that Paul, in telling the church at Corinth why they should believe, went down this list of things and said, okay, here's what I taught you, and here's what I received as of first importance. Here's the gospel by which you are saved. That's the first few, 4 verses of 1 Corinthians 15. And then he says, Jesus died rose again according to the script, died for our sins according to the scriptures, rose again according to the scriptures. Then he appeared first to Peter, and then to James, and then to the 12, and then to hundreds of the brothers. Mm-hmm. Most of, some of whom have fallen asleep, or most are still alive.
Yeah.
Which was his way of saying to the church at Corinth, if you don't believe me, just go to Jerusalem and ask around, because there are witnesses, multiple witnesses.
Hundreds of them.
Hundreds of witnesses.
Yeah. Why can't an alien do that?
Why can't an alien do that? And that's kind of what, nailed it for me. Once James, okay, he was a disbeliever. He was a skeptic when Jesus was alive, but seeing the risen Jesus and then being able to go talk to hundreds of other guys, did you see that thing? No, we saw him too. Mm-hmm. Okay, well, I guess he is God. And then 30 years later, James was martyred because he refused to recant his belief that his brother, his half-brother, Yeshua, was Hamashiach.
Yeah.
Okay.
They knew it to the point of their own deaths.
Right. That, for me, that was like a light switch being flipped. Mm-hmm. And the fact that it was confirmed by multiple witnesses that 20 years later, Paul was still appealing to. Look, don't believe me? Go ask these guys. Yep. They'll confirm what I said, because they are the ones I went and checked with in the book of Galatians, by the way. He mentions that to the church at Galatia. He went and spent 15 days with Peter and James to confirm what he'd been taught by the brothers in Damascus. Yep. He investigated. He didn't take it just strictly on faith. He's like, okay, I'm going to make sure. Mm-hmm. And he went back to Jerusalem and he said, yeah, that's what we heard directly. So your vision was authentic, because it's... Yep.
He thought critically about it and went out and got evidence.
Exactly.
Yeah, and God likes that. I think that God expects us to do that.
Yes.
Exactly. Come let us reason together. We got to reason. Right. It's not speculate.
And Peter on Pentecost, in Acts chapter 2, the very first Christian sermon in public, really, after the death and resurrection of Jesus, said, hey, look, men of Jerusalem, this Jesus whom you killed rose from the dead, and of this we are all witnesses. Yep. That is a key point. Yeah. But again, multiple witnesses. Mm-hmm. And that's something you never seem to get. Now, there are some encounters, like this one in December that the New York Times reported on. Mm-hmm. And I want to make this point clear. We've kind of alluded to it. We don't believe that nothing is happening. Right. Something is happening. It's just not what UFO true believers think it is. That's right. Multiple witnesses to that UFO encounter back in 2004, the USS Nimitz UFO encounter. I got to confess, and this is, I should have read more about that before we did our first few interviews, because I'm like, no big deal. Really, there were a lot of witnesses to that thing. Yeah. There were the two F-18 crews from the Navy who were sent out there by the USS Princeton, which is a guided missile cruiser, who reported that they had seen a weird radar contact. These things are coming down from 80,000 feet, hovering at 20,000, and then either dropping below radar or shooting straight back up again. Mm-hmm. So can you please check it out, because there's one there now. And so these two F-18s from the U.S. Navy, carrier group, Carrier Air Wing 11 on the USS Nimitz, Commander David Fravor and Lieutenant Commander Jim Slight were the two pilots. But both of those F-18F Super Hornets have two-man crews. So they get there. Slight provides high air cover. Fravor goes down to look at it. Notice that he didn't see the thing at first, but he did see an area in the water. And this is really interesting, because he saw a USO, which is a submerged object, unidentified submerged object or swimming object, whatever. But he said couldn't see what it was, but it was close enough to the surface that waves were breaking across it. And the area was 50 to 100 meters across. That's 150 to 300 feet, roughly. Yeah. That's big. Yeah. He thought they had just found a commercial airliner, like a 747 that had just crashed in the ocean. Oh, wow. And that's when he noticed this thing hovering about 50 feet over. And so he started circling to go down to encounter it. It began to rise toward him. So he broke off his circular descent, aimed for it, and that's when it took off. He lost it in like fogs and mist, and haze, and the other pilot, Slight, Lieutenant Commander Slight, lost it as well. So they contacted the Princeton, said, this is what happened. What should we do? They agreed to meet at their cap point, which is a rendezvous point about 60 miles away. But then a few moments later, the radar operator at Princeton said, hey, you guys, you're not going to believe this, but the thing is already at your cap point. Now, the cap point was 60 miles away. Commander Fravor, as he remembers the story, said we were still at least 40 miles away. That thing covered the distance in less than a minute. Wow. So rounding up the math to say, okay, if he took exactly a minute And we know it was faster than that according to Commander Fravor. But if it took exactly a minute to go 60 miles, that's 3,600 miles per hour.
Yeah.
The fastest aircraft known is the SR-71 Blackbird, the Lockheed SR-71 Blackbird.
Mm-hmm.
Maximum speed, 2,200 miles per hour.
Mm.
The max speed on the FA-18F Super Hornet is about 1150.
Wow.
So this thing was traveling 3 times faster than the F-18. Now, they returned back to the Nimitz. Another training flight was getting ready to take off 4 F-18s. They were directed back to that area, and that was where they captured the video. That's been, in fact, we showed it on Sci Friday again this week. That's the one that the New York Times posted. Mm-hmm. That was captured with infrared sensors. There were 4 F-18s who spotted it, and meanwhile, a Marine Corps F-18 with a Lieutenant Colonel Cheeks at the stick. He and his colleague had seen it as well, about the same time as Fravor and Slight.
Yeah.
The 4 F-18s found it, tracked it, recorded it on this infrared radar. Couldn't identify what the heck it was. An E-2 Poseidon, which is one of those big, planes with a screw top on it. One of those radar early aerial warning planes.
That
was controlling them by radar. It basically detected it on radar as well. The bottom line is something there was going on, because you had a bunch of guys who saw it or detected it on radar. So this is not a hoax.
Right.
The interesting thing is that the infrared radar, if this thing had been propelled by a combustion engine of some sort, would have been spewing hot gases out of it that would have lit up the radar, the infrared sensor
at that speed. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Nothing.
Yep.
Nothing. So whatever was moving it, it wasn't generating any heat. Mm-hmm. So we don't know what the heck that thing was, but it's probably not a hoax.
Yeah, it's really weird. And when you think about it, it's like, some people might say, well, there's your evidence. You get a bunch of witnesses.
Right.
Okay, well, this thing, whatever it was, had the attention of a lot of people and had the opportunity to say something and didn't. When Jesus appeared to the hundreds, he said stuff.
And here's the other thing. Just because the F-18 pilots, the E-2 pilot, the USS Princeton radar operator, fire control operator, and there was the USS Los Angeles, which is a fast attack nuclear submarine. It was in the area, part of the Nimitz group. Never detected that USO, whatever it was just under the water.
Weird.
Yeah.
I think that thing whatever it was wanted to be seen.
Well, that's possible. Mm-hmm. It's possible. But the point is, just because they couldn't identify what it was doesn't automatically mean that it came from outside our solar system.
Right. Exactly.
I mean, there are a lot of planes that were identified as extraterrestrial until the government said, oh, yeah, that's the stealth fighter.
That's us.
Yeah, that's us.
Yeah, and that brings up an interesting point, too, is a lot of this could be secret technology.
Right.
That's perfectly within the laws of physics, but it's just advanced and we don't know about it.
Right.
Very well, that could be a lot of it. Some of it might be some type of beings, that are still earthbound, but... Mm-hmm. And that's why we talk about the extra dimensional stuff with the old gods and stuff like that. Because when we talk about old gods, we're not talking about things from another planet. They're here.
Right. And that's the key point, is something is going on. And we as Christians fully admit that we are being visited by non-human entities.
Yes.
Non-human entities have been visiting Earth for thousands of years.
We're trying to meet you halfway, true believers.
Exactly. Give us. But when they start talking about extra dimensional point of origin, well, as Christians, we should say, well, now you're talking our language.
Yeah.
Like Paul on Mars Hill saying, look at these gods. I see you're very religious. Let me talk to you about this one here, the unknown God. That's what we're doing with this book.
Yep.
Yeah. Extra dimensional. We get that.
Yeah.
Let's talk to you about that.
Yep.
Because we have the answers that you're looking for in these unidentified craft and these abduction experiences. Mm-hmm. A lot of what goes on out there is... connected to the intelligence agencies. I mean, the reason the intelligence agencies have had their fingers in the UFO phenomenon since 1947, and probably before that, is not because the government's trying to hide the existence of, not necessarily because the government's trying to hide the existence of ETs. It's because, 1940, let's use the Roswell
example. It provides them a convenient cover when they need one for something.
Exactly. There's really good evidence to suggest that the crash outside Roswell was not extraterrestrial. It was terrestrial, but it was a project that we didn't want the Russians especially, maybe the Chinese, but the Russians for sure to know about. Yeah. And possibly the American public, if in fact, and there's good evidence for this, too, that Nazi scientists smuggled into the U.S. under Operation Paperclip were involved. The American public, less than 2 years after thousands and thousands of American servicemen and women had been killed fighting Hitler, to say, oh, yeah, we brought a bunch of his guys over here now, and they're working for us.
Yeah.
That wouldn't have gone over really well.
No.
I mean, I was taunted in the 60s and as a kid. You know, I'm only half German. My mother's side of the family, they emigrated in 1894. But, you know, Germans, I was still being called a little Nazi in the late 60s.
Yep.
You know, as a kid, like 7, 8, 9 years old. Oh, here's a Nazi. What?
What's a Nazi?
You know, my friend up the street, his dad had been a top turret gunner in a B-17 in World War II, which at the time, I thought, wow, that must have been so cool. Yeah, not realizing that as a young man, that my friend's father must have been, you know, just terrified because most of those crews didn't make it, but 5, 6 missions before they got shot down. So anyway, you don't really have a frame of reference when you're 10 years old about life. Yeah. But anyway, point being, it was in the government's interest to direct attention away from any explanation that pointed toward a terrestrial origin for whatever it was that crashed outside Roswell, especially if German scientists were involved.
Yep.
Especially if human subjects were involved, which is also a possibility.
Yeah. Oh, the Progeria stuff.
Exactly. Yeah. So anyway, we don't deal with that heavily in the book, but we do point out that from the very earliest days of the phenomenon, that you had guys who later showed up connected to the JFK assassination. Yeah. Or the investigations into the JFK assassination anyway. That's let's just use some critical thinking here.
Yeah.
Let's not adopt the History Channel method of logic. Well, we don't know how they did it, so aliens
must be secret technology from aliens.
Exactly. Yeah. And sadly, in the Christian community, there's a little bit of that too. You know, we don't know, so therefore Nephilim.
Yep.
Yeah. We
that's why I bring up that this is not that.
Right.
This is not a Nephilim book.
Yeah, and I say that, and of course my next book is going to deal with sacrifices to the dead to honor, the Nephilim, really, because that went on in some of the pagan cultures around there, whether they knew that that's what they were doing or not. But we can't get there without evidence. We can't jump there. Chris White's Ancient Aliens Debunked is a great resource. If people haven't watched that film, they should. It's 3 hours long, but Dr. Michael Heiser played an important role in it, and it really just totally dismantles the whole ancient aliens hypothesis, which we don't have time to dig into deeply here, but it will just say that in the book we show exactly where it comes from, and it is drawn straight from the occult.
Yep.
It's basically rehashed theosophy and the teachings of Aleister Crowley, filtered through the horror fiction of H.P. Lovecraft. I mean, basically, Lovecraft took their stuff for his fiction, and that was repackaged by Eric von Daniken.
Yep. Yeah, there's a direct line of correlation.
It's unbelievable. And yet, von Daniken's got the best-selling book of archaeology ever, and it spawned a new religion.
Yeah.
So that's why we wrote the book.
That's right.
So, just for people not familiar with your previous books, Quantum Creation and Cherub and Chariots, talk a little bit about Unraveling the Multiverse.
Yeah, so that's basically what Unraveling the Multiverse is. I'll hold that up again. I wanted to put out an updated and expanded edition of both my previous books, because when I wrote Quantum Creation and Cherubim Chariots, this was pre-Defender, for me. So it was all self-published, and there were some issues with it, and there was a lot that I wanted to improve on. And it's not to say that there's really anything wrong with, the information is still correct, but just little things like with pictures and formatting and stuff. But there was a lot more that I wanted to add, but it wasn't really cohesive enough for its own book.
Gotcha.
It could have been, but it would have been scattered and all over the place, because a lot of the new information was additional information from what I already wrote about, if that makes sense. So
yeah.
So I decided to put those two books together, add a whole bunch of new information. So people who get Unraveling the Multiverse are not just getting, if people already have my other two books, they're not just getting that in one book. It is that, but with a ton of new information that they're not going to be able to find anywhere else. So that's basically what it's quantum physics from a Christian perspective. It's quantum physics in a way that people can actually understand, believe it or not. That is possible. It's just we have physicists today that want to talk like they're smarter than everybody. And, you know, they probably are, but, you know, if you're going to be that smart, you should learn how to talk to people. And but it's also Cherubim Chariots, which does deal with the extra dimensional hypothesis, how that fits in with quantum physics and understandings of other dimensions, what these entities are. And that's why, in a way, dovetails with The Day the Earth Stands Still, which was, I thought, brilliant on Tom's part to put these two books in the same package.
Right, and along with the novels by Dr. Michael Heiser, on A View from the Bunker, we've talked with Mike about both of these books. You can go back and find. In fact, I will link to those interviews in the show notes, both at vftb.net and below this video at youtube.com/Derek Gilbert, because both of these books, you know, I keep close by as reference because the texts, the research that he cites in here, the incidents that he includes in the books are real. The research is real. You know, the storyline, the plot is of course fiction, but the information behind it is real. And of course, the theology is sound.
Yes.
So when you go to officialdisclosure.com, which is the official website for this book, you click the link there to the Skywatch TV store, and you can get this, Josh's new book, both of Mike's novels, 2 additional books, the audio series.
I think it was just called Official Disclosure.
Official Disclosure,
yeah,
and plus a number of interviews that have never been broadcast or
Operation
published.
Stargate, is that what they called it? Yeah. And the phenomenal set of interviews that no one's going to be able to find anywhere else. I mean, there's unaired interviews with the late Chris Putnam are in there. We have stuff for L.A.
Chuck
Marzulli, Gary
Missler.
Stearman, Chuck Missler,
And then down in Roswell, Joe Jordan, Mike Heiser, the alien hunter Daryl Sims.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
That was the most remarkable 45 minutes I've ever spent in an interview.
Yeah, mine too. That interview alone, I think, is worth the price of the entire.
And the account of Joyce Ahrens, thank you, who is a multiple-time abductee. I remember seeing her story when it was broadcast on the television show Sightings back in the 90s.
Yeah, me too.
And now to have met her, that was truly an honor. The opportunity to sit and talk with her and hear her story was just really, really remarkable.
Yeah, and there was stuff in there that she even said, I've never told this anywhere else before. Stuff that apparently, like, she was remembering things. And so, I mean, there's exclusive material in there that if people are familiar with her story, there's extra details that she recalled that they won't get anywhere else.
Guy Malone as well. Yep. So those interviews are... They fill in a lot of backstory, background information on what this phenomenon is, what the alien abduction phenomenon particularly is, and what the motives of these entities are. If these truly are extraterrestrial, then they're just flat evil. Yeah. But if they're extra-dimensional and evil, well, gosh, again, as Christians, you're speaking our language.
Yep, exactly.
So, these you won't find these interviews on YouTube. They've never been broadcast. They've never been published anywhere before.
You can't go to Amazon and buy them separately. Exactly. You can't even really buy them separately here. You got to get the book.
Right. So,
but $39.99 for the book, and then you get all over $400 or something worth of extra material.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
A pretty good deal.
I mean, these 4 books alone would be what... these are 16,
probably about $80,
$32 plus. It was about at least $70 worth of books here. But for $40, you get these books plus 2 others, plus the videos, plus the audio series.
Yeah.
So Operation Official Disclosure. Like I said, this is going to be a rough one. Officialdisclosure.com. Now, coming up in March, while you're here, we might as well talk about this. Hear the Watchmen.
Yeah.
Mike Kerr and Jeannie Moore have invited you and Christina and me and Sharon, along with a bunch of our friends, to Dallas.
Yeah. So, you'll be giving a presentation. I'm going to be teaching a workshop.
Yep.
And
my presentation will be, coincidentally, on this.
Yeah. My workshop will be how do you make it in Christian media? And not to brag, but just hard work ethic can get somebody really far. And I don't think a lot of people really realize that.
Consistency.
Yeah,
just producing content.
I mean, I went literally from poverty, dirt poor, having nothing, to within since I first heard the word Nephilim, within 3 or 4 years to working here. And that didn't happen by accident. Nothing was handed to me. This wasn't some charity case. I had to really work for that. And there's a lot of things that I learned along the way, a lot of mistakes that I made even. that had I known, I probably, I would have been even more effective. But that I know now, and as far as I know, nothing's been written or really talked about teaching other people how to do that.
Yeah.
We'll get emails all the time from really inspired or motivated people that they have the work ethic, they have the drive, they just don't know what to actually do.
Right. And it's smart that they're asking because, reinventing the wheel is really difficult. I mean, when Sharon and I started our podcast back in 2005, there were very, very few podcasts out there. That's when Apple was still sending out notes saying, hey, if you produce a podcast, please send us the link to the RSS feed because we want you in the iTunes podcast store. Yeah. Now it's like, okay, go through this, fill this out, fill that out, and we'll get back to you. So that's why I am loath to change the address of the XML files that we upload every week that we've been because I just don't want to break anything that's working.
Oh, I don't blame you.
But it's stuff that we had to learn the hard way.
Yep.
And if
luckily you actually were a big inspiration to me because you were one of the few people that I actually that would actually return my emails. But you were one of the rare people that I had at my disposal where I could just ask you questions and you would answer. And you gave me a lot of great advice on podcasting and the equipment and just across the board. So that was such a big help to me. And I want to be able to do that for other people. I'm trying, I'm not going to make any promises, but I'm trying to get out a book. It'll just be self-published, something that I can just put out. But I'm trying to put a book together specifically for this conference on how to do all this stuff. If you're somebody at home, even if you have no money and you can't invest anything, how can you get started if you have a message, you want to say something, you want to build an online audience, whether it's YouTube or Facebook or, whatever it is. How to actually go about doing that. So hopefully I'll have the book out by the time of the conference, but that's definitely what the workshop will be about. So, yeah.
So Christina will be there as well. She's conducting a workshop. Some of the other folks that will be at this conference include Bill Salas. He'll be a first-timer at Hear the Watchman. L.A. Marzulli, of course, Pastor Carl Gallups, Pastor Paul Begley, Mark Taylor, co-author of The Trump Prophecies, along with Mary Colbert.
Yeah.
Dr. Don Colbert will be there as well.
He's the teaching workshop, I believe.
Yep. Casper McLeod, Dr. Michael Lake.
Yeah.
And
John B. Wells.
Oh, yes, John B. Wells, the man whose voice I want when I grow up.
You're almost there. You're almost there.
Just another octave to go.
Yeah.
And,
you only got like 6 more octaves and you'll be there.
I just don't think that's going to happen. So, and a new friend of ours, Rabbi Zev Parat, will be there as well. Again, it's March 22nd through the 25th at the DFW Lakes Hilton DFW Lakes. So get that right. Hilton DFW Lakes Conference Center in Grapevine, Texas. And you can save 20%, save $20 off the registration if you can be there in person by using either promo code Gilbert20 or Peck20.
Yes, but go ahead and use Gilbert20 since this is his show. I'll promote mine on my own show. But if you have a hard time spelling his name because it's very long and it's very many syllables, just Peck20 is really easy to remember.
The 20% discount is off the $49 streaming fee.
Yes.
They will be live. Well, it's not live streaming per se. What they do is they'll record it, and then very quickly, like within an hour of the end of a presentation, it'll be uploaded to Vimeo, and then you can watch it that way. They eliminate the possibility of an interruption in the live stream.
Which is good, because that happens quite often.
It can. When you're in a hotel and you got many people hitting on the Wi-Fi or the So anyway, but it's not technically live, but it's almost live. But because it's not live, you have a better chance of not having the feed interrupted. So anyway, you'll find all that information at hearthewatchman.com. That's hearthewatchman.com, and use the promo codes either Gilbert20 or Peck20 to save, whether you're going in person or just taking advantage of the video presentation.
Yeah, come and see us. We're excited to meet all of you.
Absolutely. And again, officialdisclosure.com for the book. And we will close now. Josh, we got to do this more often because this is actually easy. You just come across the wall here. Give us a review on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever else you find us. Of course, this podcast is available wherever fine podcasts are sold. And give us a like on Facebook, facebook.com/View from the Bunker, which is a production of Gilbert House and released under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives 4.0 International License. The opening theme is by Kevin MacLeod. His website is incompetech.com. Our announcer with the opening is DC Good. Remember, we wrestle not against flesh and blood. I'm Derek Gilbert, and this is A View from the Bunker.